Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the Cottage Kitchen at the Elliott Homestead. I was told once that every recipe should have the handprint of a family on it. And I'm very pleased to bring you a recipe today that has much more than a handprint, really. I'm going to be making Melissa Muller's Christmas and Easter lamb. If you're not familiar with Melissa Muller, she is the co-owner and wife to Fabio, and together they own and run Feudo Montoni. Feudo Montoni is that winery that we introduced you to a few weeks ago. I'll be sure to tag that video below. But this dish is actually how Fabio and Melissa met, so it's extra special to her. She was writing this cookbook called Sicily. It's a beautiful cookbook. I'm gonna put a link to it below the video. And in chasing down this recipe from Fabio's mother, she ends up meeting Fabio. Long story short, they're now married. They now run the winery together and they have 2 beautiful children. So she was kind enough to share this dish with me. This dish is also really special to me because so much of what we have to grow here on our own farm is in this dish. So we have lamb and onions and rosemary and bay, wine and tomato passata. So everything but the wine is really coming from our farm here, and that's extra special. Lamb is a huge part of our diet here because it's the main meat that we raise. So even though we only keep a few breeding ewes around, we keep katahdin, which is a hair sheep. Hair sheep are grown primarily for meat production. The flavor is very mild, it's very tender meat, and it does really well on small amounts of land, which makes it really ideal for a small homestead. So I'm going to be adapting Melissa's dish ever so slightly to accommodate for what we have here. Now, when Melissa showed me how to make this dish, mind you, it's a very special dish that she makes for Christmas and for Easter, because in her dish, they get a very young lamb that's only had its mother's milk, meaning it's never grazed grass or been given any kind of grain. The result of that is a very tender meat. I don't have any lambs like that, nor do I have any like that to butcher right now. But what I do have is our beautiful lamb harvest from last year. So this is a leg of lamb. This is from about a 10-month-old lamb that was fed its mother's milk for the whole of its life, as well as being grass-fed. So it grazed and it had its mother's milk as much as it liked. And the result is a very mild and very tender and very red, just incredible meat. It almost kind of brings me to tears because it feels so special when you sit down to a dish that you have seen from birth to plate. That's really special. So this is a leg of lamb that we've just sort of pieced out. We've kept the bone in. That's very essential for really good sauce and really good tender meat. Stu's just sort of helped me to piece it out, and it's been salted and hanging out in here in this big bowl with rosemary and bay. The dish starts with a lot of chopped onions, so I'm gonna go ahead and get chopping those, mincing them fairly fine, and introduce you to Melissa.
10 years ago, Melissa Muller was a well-known chef in New York. This was before she decided to adventure to Sicily to study the history and food and culture that she had grown up around. It was there that she met her husband Fabio while discovering this classic recipe which she was seeking out from Fabio's mother. Fabio and Melissa now run this incredible vineyard. We stayed with Melissa and Fabio for a few days in the heart of Sicily, studying everything that we could from their land and from their kitchen.
You'll see in Melissa's kitchen how much this dish rests on just very few ingredients. Good meat, rosemary, bay leaves, olive oil, a huge pot of sweated onions, good red wine, good salt, and last but not least, tomato passata. After being in Melissa's kitchen, I was really inspired to come back to my own garden and make my first round of tomato passata. So these are sauce tomatoes, which have less water content than your average tomato. They're cooked down really slow with onions and just a little bit of basil before being run through a food pureer to take out all the seeds and all of the skins. And then that is canned. So it's kind of like a quick sauce, but because it's been slow cooked down, it has a little bit more flavor than a traditional tomato sauce. You can even see the color is a deeper red than a traditional tomato sauce. So that's what I'm going to be using to not create a sauce, but to create sort of a flavor profile around this really beautiful meat.
Kamikoto is the sponsor of this video here on the Elliott Homestead, and once again, we are so excited to get to share this wonderful company with you. These are the knives that we use in our kitchen. They're made using a traditional Japanese technique used by Japanese craftsmen, and it takes years to master and to make these knives from Japanese steel. They're individually inspected, come with a lifetime guarantee, and are delivered to you in a beautiful ash wood box that makes them ideal for storage or travel. These knives are used in Michelin star kitchens around the world for good reason. They're so incredibly sharp and so wonderfully well balanced. Kamikoto has been kind enough to offer Elliott Homestead viewers a discount, so visit kamikoto.com/The Elliott to get $50 off your purchase of Kamikoto knives.
So while my onions soften, I'm going to take my fresh rosemary sprigs off of the stem and just give them a rough chop.
Okay, just to give you a background.
Yes.
The lamb is one of those baby lambs that you saw out there today, so a
Yes.
few months old.
Okay.
That feeds only off of the mother's milk. This is a dish that we normally make on Christmas, on Easter, because in the winter and the spring you have the really green fields, and the meat tastes very delicious. Mm-hmm. So does the milk at that time for the cheese making. And so traditionally that's the timing that you would make this dish with lamb. Of course the meat is very tender, and how it's cut traditionally here is that the animal is broken down, just chop with the butcher knife, mm-hmm. into pieces, leaving the bones. Mm-hmm. So there's really no difference or distinguishing between, a piece that comes from the rib cage or a piece that comes from the thigh. It just all goes in together. Of course, we all know that certain pieces will cook faster than the others, mm-hmm. but we wait till the whole dish is, all the meat is very nice and tender, mm-hmm. In the oven.
Can you tell me what? So there's bay, rosemary.
This is bay leaf and rosemary. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Okay.
And how long does it sit like this?
The first step is cleaning it. So I get it from Franco, the shepherd, and then I wash them very well and I dry them off very well. Okay. And then if I'm not cooking it right away, because this animal came yesterday, I leave it with rosemary and bay leaf just to start giving it some aroma. But and the meat gets when it rests like that, it's definitely a positive. It gets nice, even more tender and even more flavorful.
And I find the same cooking it on the bone. There's just no comparison to meat cooked on a bone.
No. This is a family recipe of my mother-in-law's, and this was the recipe that my husband and I met over, because he was providing me with the recipe for the book. Lots of oil. Lots of oil. Don't be afraid of the oil in this dish. We need the oil because one of the keys to this dish is creating a so-called sughetto. The sugo in Italian means a sauce. Sughetto means like a little sauce. What we mean by that is that you need something to coat the meat. Mm-hmm. So it's not that it's draining in sauce. It's not made in a sauce, like you're not putting it in a big pot of tomato sauce, for example. But what's created during the cooking process between the onion, the peeled tomato, the olive oil, and the wine creates a so-called sughetto, or that creaminess that coats the meat. Mm-hmm.
The smell from these very simple ingredients is extraordinary. So now that my onions are softened and that rosemary and that bay is just fragrant, I'm gonna add in probably about a half a bottle of wine and 4 cups of my tomato passata.
Everything that's found in this dish is from the land of Montoni. So we have the lamb that are not our animals, as you know, but they're from Franco, the organic shepherd, who brings his animals on our land. So they graze off the earth here. Then from the small details, the rosemary, the bay leaf, and then the olive oil and the wine and the tomato. So just the salt that we don't produce. And so what better way of expressing, family and unity, if not also representing one's own land and territory through the ingredients, not only through the tradition of the dish, but through the ingredients that go into it. There's a saying in Sicilian, there's a saying or a proverb that says "Orto uomo morto," which means a vegetable garden is a dead man, because you put so much of your time and effort that you just become not literally a dead man, but you cut off you don't have time for social activities. If you really want that garden to come out right, you have time for the garden.
Yeah, we have people ask us often if it pencils out cost-wise to have a vegetable garden. And I said, well, that depends on how much you charge for your labor per hour.
Sure, exactly.
Because if you charge really any amount for your labor, no, it doesn't. It's not going to save you money. There's somebody who can do it faster and cheaper.
Sure,
but
absolutely.
Not better.
These are the
look at all these
the bay leaves. We have a few trees on the property, so every few weeks I pick some and dry some, but we go through it so fast. This same dish can be made by just taking the tray, taking the pieces of the lamb, and then adding the raw onions, the bay leaf, the rosemary, and so forth, without cooking them. I've just found that over time of making this now for so many holidays, is that the concentration and the flavor of that so-called sughetto intensifies when the onions especially are nice and
when you start
them off. And I'm sure that back in the day that's how my mother-in-law did it as well. But when she describes a recipe, and before Fabio and I were married and we met through the recipe, and she was describing it saying, well, you take the onion and the tomato and the wine and the oil and you put it all together and put it in the oven, and that's it. And she's right, and that's it. But of course, there's that touch that you have to give to it that goes into every dish. And then maybe her way of doing it was the onion a little differently. She's still alive and she's with us, but she's passed on this task. The holiday, she's 93, so she's passed on this task. It's my happy duty of the family to prepare this dish. Perhaps she did it a little bit differently, and the onion was sliced and it wasn't chopped up, but it really doesn't matter, because at the end, it's her recipe that I'm putting my feeling into, and we all represent the family and on some.
I like to think of, we butcher our lambs every year, and we eat a lot of them, and I like to think of that kind of being a distinctive meat almost of our family, because in America, at least where we are, it's not something that you get a lot of places. It's fairly rare for people to eat lamb.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, if there's going to be a distinguishing taste,
it
is one of the things that they're only going to get at home. So I hope that it reminds them of home and brings them comfort, And I've never prepared it in this way at all. So it's really neat to see somebody else cook.
I have filled my dish as much as I dare to. I've probably made enough sauce for 2 batches, which is great, because now that much work is already done for the next time. This is gonna go into a warm oven, a little bit low and slow until it's fall apart tender. I'm so grateful for people like Melissa who go out of their way, take their time, and put their energy into keeping recipes like this alive and sharing them. Not all of us grew up with a really traditional food heritage that we can kind of deep dive into. And I feel so grateful when people are willing to share that hand-printed family recipe with me. I think recipes only grow in joy and in pleasure when we share them with people. I don't want to keep any of these things secret. I want to make them and share them and get more people eating and enjoying them, and ultimately bring more people to the table. Melissa and Fabio made us feel so welcomed in sharing their information with us, in sharing their food with us, and in sharing their table with us. And the fact that we get to bring that experience back to Washington State, to our own table, to our own farm, is really special. I hope you guys enjoy this really beautiful and very delicious Christmas lamb. Cheers.